Welcome to this Euractiv debate on digital inclusiveness, how to ensure no European is left behind. Our event today is supported by GIGAEurope. You can follow this debate at #EADebates, and please tweet your comments there using the hashtag. Our social media team will respond and interact with you. And to ask questions, go to the chat section and use the ask button. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the role and perception of digitalization in our societies. There's now an increasing focus on the importance of the infrastructure which enables large numbers of people to work, communicate, educate, shop, and socialize. But this focus has also led to questions about a growing digital divide. In March, the Commission presented a vision, targets, and avenues for a successful digital transformation of Europe by 2030. The EU's ambition is to be digitally sovereign in an open and interconnected world. Targets set by the Commission include that by 2030, at least 80% of all adults should have basic digital skills. And by 2030, the Commission wants all European households to be covered by a gigabit network. In this Euractiv GIGAEurope Digital Debate, we'll look at the role of connectivity to close the digital divides and what investments are needed to roll out gigabyte networks and 5G to reach every European. This morning, we have a keynote speaker, and then we have an excellent panel as well, which I'll introduce to you in just a moment. For the moment, let's meet our keynote speaker, Victor Negrescu, member of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the Culture Committee. He's also the European Parliament Rapporteur on shaping digital education policy. Victor, great to see you again. And I'll give you the floor just now as well, and then we'll come back and you'll stay with us for the discussion afterwards as well. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me today, and I'm happy to have this keynote speech at the beginning of this important conference, speaking about digital inclusiveness and how we can reduce the digital divide at European level. Of course, you mentioned very well, Brian, in your intervention, that we need, of course, to find solutions at European level, reduce inequality while at the same time making sure all Europeans are taking advantage of this great opportunity offered by the digital evolutions. But in order to do so, we have to be well organized and have a clear strategy in this direction. That implies, first of all, to make sure that everyone has access to this type of innovation, that everyone has access to fast internet, that everyone has access to technologies that allow them, of course, to develop professionally while using digital tools, to make sure that we have the infrastructure available in all countries, in all regions, and for everyone independently of the place where they are living, and in the same time that those elements are available also for those that come from disadvantaged groups. In the same time, of course, beyond access, we have to make sure that the quality of the solutions available and the quality of the use of the digital infrastructure and technologies is high. And this is even tougher than what I mentioned at the beginning, the access, because we have to make sure that we have standards at European level and that those standards are being applied across Europe, to make sure that we have skilled professors to teach everyone to learn how to use digital tools, to make sure that SMEs in Europe are using the digital infrastructure in a suitable way for them. And this is harder, because if we look at statistics, things are not yet there. We have more than half of the European population that doesn't have the basic digital skills required to develop themselves. We have many SMEs at European level that are not using digital tools to develop their businesses. We have, unfortunately, 60% of European professors that do not know how to use in a proper way digital tools in order to teach others. And all of those elements represent big problems that we are dealing with at European level, and it's not enough to fix targets. What is good, nevertheless, is that we decided from the recovery plans to allocate at least 20% for the digital transformation. So we have to make sure that those funds, those resources that are being made available through the recovery plans in different member states are being used wisely and that are generating a strong and concrete impact in the lives of European citizens. So it's not enough only to have the 20% allocation. We have to make sure that we have proper and adequate actions in the recovery plans of member states that will provide a concrete and long-term impact in the lives of people and, of course, improve connectivity as such and improve the quality of the connectivity across member states. So of course, starting from this issue of access and quality, we need to divide broader policies. The European Parliament has come up with several proposals in this regard, focusing on education, focusing on innovation, focusing in supporting entrepreneurship in the digital sector. We are working together with the Commission. We are working with member states in trying to implement and identify the best way to do so. But what is clear, and this will be the last message of my intervention, is that we cannot simply wait for things to happen. This will be the biggest mistake that Europe can commit, is by simply waiting for things to happen. Things will not come from nowhere. It's not enough to have a smart digital entrepreneur building a business somewhere in Europe. We need to do more than that in order to have a proper digital transformation of Europe as a whole. If we want to be the leader at global level, Europe needs to do more on that. We have some of the tools available. We have some of the methods available. Now we have some of the funding available, but we need to build synergies between all of that, work with the relevant stakeholders in the field, use the, let's say, opportunities that are available for us, but also the advantages that Europe have in the field, and of course construct a strong policy in the field at all layers in the same time, and to be very frank, at a faster pace. So I'm really happy that I'm here today discussing this topic with you, and I'm certain that this conference as well will accelerate the process in convincing also decision makers and the private leaders to work together in delivering on those important targets. Thank you.
Victor Negrescu, thank you. Stay with us for discussion. Let's introduce the rest of the panel now. We have with us today Fabrizia Benini, and she's Deputy to Director and Head of Unit at Digital Economy, Recovery Plan and Skills, DG Connect, the European Commission. Great to see you. We have also Georgi Dimitrov. He's the Head of Unit Digital Education, DG EAC at the European Commission. Excellent to have you with us, sir. And Iban Garcia del Blanco, Member of the European Parliament, Vice President of Jury Committee, S&D Coordinator of the IDA Special Committee, and Substitute of the Culture Committee at the European Parliament. We also have Mario Marianello. He's a Senior Fellow at the think tank Bruegel in Brussels. And Eka Verma, she's the Vice President of Public Policy at Liberty Global. Great to have all of you with us today. Now, just as always, we're going to ask each of our panelists to start with a 60-second introduction, just their key message for this session. Fabrizia, let's start with you. 60 seconds.
Thank you, Brian. Well, MP Negrescu was absolutely spot on when we say targets are not enough. We need to do more. And that is what is the digital decade proposal, which is a decision before the co-legislators, the European Parliament and the Council, that put forward not only targets that will guarantee a European way to digitize in the next decade, but also sets up a mechanism to discuss what to do, identify the gaps, and try and bring together the synergies amongst all the policies, because it's only a concerted effort that can help us get there. So to give you an example, on digital skills, which is the area that I follow most closely, today 66% of the EU population possesses basic digital skills. This is very little, but 84% use the internet. So there's something wrong here. There's something wrong here because this means there are parts of the population that are using the internet without the sufficient knowledge to understand what is it that they're reading, what is it that they are consulting, what is it that they are downloading, and how that influences their other decisions, their other rights, and above all, the democratic processes to which we engage. Why is it important to go for both digital skills in the basic level and advanced skills, which is another target in the digital decade, in terms of having at least 20 million advanced ICT specialists in employment by 2030? It is important because without the skills to actually develop the tools, to develop and design the internet solutions that we need, we will always be subject to acquiring them, to be passive consumers. Whereas we have very clear ideas of the rights that we want our citizens to have whilst they navigate the internet, what happens to their data, the access and equal access to platform use, etc. So we do need to have that talent to be sure that Europe can use the internet and develop its own tools. And this is a shortage that faces all countries. 70% of employers regret not having digitally skilled workforce, both whether they are digitally advanced or not. And therefore, the push towards it needs to be a pipeline approach, both in terms of education, and my colleague Georgi can tell you more about that, from cradle to tomb, so to speak.
Thank you. We'll come back into, I know you don't have a lot of time for this today, so I want to speak to you about skills just after we introduce the rest of the panel as well. So stay with us for that. Georgi, over to you, 60 seconds, sir.
Good afternoon and great to be here. So there is a saying that education is the great equalizer when it comes to the chances of men and women and any others to access what is best to perform and to exploit their potential. And in a transformation such as the one that we're going through right now, the digital, it is probably even a greater equalizer than it has been for the last few centuries. However, what we have seen and what MEP Negrescu rightly pointed to is that in COVID, we saw under the magnifying glass some of the bigger problems that were underlying and which seem to persist, be they around access to infrastructure, be they lack of digitally skilled teachers who cannot teach online when it needs to be done, or, as a matter of fact, the level of skills and competences of the younger population. As my colleague Fabrizia pointed out, it's not enough to consume information. You need to be able to make sense critically of it. So if we want to break this sort of almost a natural development where the socioeconomic background of a person is the single most important condition that explains their success over time, then we need to make sure that digital education is part of our education and training systems, and that digital education is fit also for the age that we are living in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgi. Ivan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's a real honor to be here. It's a pleasure. I would like to call for the European digital illustration, and it is in the digital age beyond the concept of digital skills or digital capabilities as well. We believe that we should this digital literacy has to be integrated into a broad plan. Digital literacy, media literacy, data literacy, artificial intelligence literacy. The aim is that every European citizen has the knowledge and understanding on how digitalization works and what digitalization means for them and for our societies. European digital illustration would include European values and principles, a fully democratic, transparent and socially responsible digitalization that respect and ensure the diversity, equality, gender equality, of course, and accessibility. Digital literacy, from my perspective, from my point of view, is not only about abilities or capacities for the market or for our market labor, but beyond this point, we are talking about democracy itself, because democracy will not be only democracy anymore, will be digital democracy as well. So we have to have the enough capabilities to understand what is going on and how we can behave like citizens in Europe. Thank you very much.
Ivan, thank you so much. Mario Marinello.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks to all of you. I mean, I tend to agree with everything that has been said until now. I think without the right digital infrastructure, the European economy is definitely doomed. But what I would like to say here is that expanding infrastructure cannot be just thought as a top-down exercise. Above all, I think it cannot be thought in isolation with all the other objectives of the digital agenda, because infrastructure can help bridge the digital divide, as you have said. But at the same time, the reverse is also true. That's very important to keep in mind. A more symmetric sharing of the value which is produced by digital technology has the potential to stimulate infrastructure investment, for example, because it increases demand for digital services. Now, technology as such has the great potential to reduce inequality, because at least theoretically, those who are supposed to benefit the most from digital technologies are those who have less, in theory, right? Because with digital technologies, for example, you can have more easy access to education or to medical care. If you have a small company, it's easier to scale up because you can use cloud services, for example. But at the same time, as some of you have said, in practice, it's very disturbing to observe that this increase in digital adoption in Europe has not been associated with a reduction in inequality. Actually, we have seen inequality exacerbating, especially during the pandemic. The pandemic really put the spotlight on this. If you consider that, for example, only 29% of low-paid workers could switch to telework. That already explains something. We at Bruegel, we found strong correlations between access to broadband connection and vaccination rates. So, of course, the reason behind this is much more complex why you don't vaccinate, but skills and digital access to digital infrastructure is part of the picture, and we should take that into account. So, in a nutshell, what I would like to say is that the bridging the digital divide on all three levels, so access to infrastructure, skills, and the ability to use those skills to extract value online, is a fundamental step also to expand the digital infrastructure.
Thank you so much. And to Eka also, to give you 60 seconds.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation for this great conference. I work for Liberty Global. Liberty Global is the largest TV and broadband company, operational in 7 countries. We are currently we always have been heavily investing in our networks and working to create fixed mobile convergence and networks across our footprint. We understand that our role is much more than just connectivity and creating a network, and also providing the people with the skills they need to get by in the digital world. So we have many programs for digital inclusion across our footprint in our operations, which we have heavily increased as well during the pandemic, as we saw, and to make sure that no one was left behind. So yeah, just to start with that.
Okay, excellent. Fabrizia, you don't have a lot of time to spend with us, so I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about skills with you before you disappear on us. You highlighted some of the elements to do with skills, but using digital technology, about simply the skill set that's needed to function in this world. And we heard also from Eben about being able to participate as a citizen. You need these digital skills too. But if we're going to build out the infrastructure that's necessary to scale up, as we've heard, do we have the skills in Europe today that's necessary to achieve what Europe is setting out? Do we have all those different skill levels which we can put together and call them digital skills, or is there a lot of work still to be done?
The answer is actually both two parts of your question. Yes, we have the skills that are necessary. Yes, we need to scale them up. So on the scaling up, I think that what is very important is that our Commission's President, Madam von der Leyen, from the outset of her tenure, said that no one should be left behind. And in September, State of the Union address, she goes back to this theme and she says, well, it's very simple. Digital skills and education need attention at leaders' level. What does this mean? It means that we're now starting a structured dialogue under the stewardship of Executive Vice President Vestager with leaders on these two aspects. To identify what? To identify where the investment is going, because as you mentioned and others before you mentioned, there's a lot of investment that is on the table or potential on the table. And two, what are the reforms that are necessary, both in schools to train the teachers, to make sure that digital subjects are there, to increase the capacity of our universities in teaching advanced technologies. And in short, to make sure that we can actually also give our workforce, and that is so important, give our workforce the possibility to be trained so that they are actually able to face the changes in the labor work. I was very stricken by the fact that, you know, the Nobel of Economics was announced to three economists that were looking, amongst other things, about the impact of a minimum wage in relation to the availability of jobs. And that, of course, speaks to inequalities and what we can do about it. So together.
But the European Union doesn't have sovereignty over education policy in different countries as well. And we see a real mismatch in terms of which countries deploy certain programs. You know, Austria, for example, and Germany as well are particularly good at the apprenticeship model for education as well. You know, and that tends to be largely industry-led. Fabrizio, do you think that, you know, there's the risk that Europe doesn't hit its target because it doesn't listen to industry telling educators what is actually needed in the marketplace? Do you think there's the risk of a mismatch here between policy objectives and the real life needs for commercial activity?
Well, the targets and the exchanges and the dialogue that goes with it are exactly put in place to avoid what the peril you're indicating. So therefore, everything needs to be done to make sure that the people we train are actually people that will be in the job market. Because, for instance, the ICT specialists target is for 20 million in employment. So that consideration was present from the outset. And I do believe that you know, this structural dialogue with leaders will enable everyone, national level, regional level, local level, to come together, because this is a subject that interests everybody, is of concern to everybody that has democracy at heart.
Thank you. Stay with us as long as you can, please. We'll try and get another couple of comments back in. Victor, you spoke, you're always very keen to emphasize the role of entrepreneurship in strengthening Europe's economy and how that dynamic works. You know, is with small businesses being the vast majority of European businesses, is this a big players game, or are Europe's policies sensitized to providing the digital skills that small, medium-sized enterprises actually need, and the skills that their potential employees will need to help us scale up their businesses?
I think, unfortunately, there is this risk that this digital transformation is only helpful for the big players. We see that also in EdTech, in the technologies implemented for education in the current pandemic, that most of the countries chose to use the technologies offered by the big companies, most of them coming from outside the European Union. So, of course, this is a huge risk. This is why I believe, of course, that one of the targets that we should fix for ourselves, also in the framework, again, of the recovery plan, is to make sure that some of the money is going to the SMEs, and that some of the projects, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to methods, when it comes to technologies, when it comes to platforms that we are using, also all those resources also involve SMEs. And we have a couple of countries that decided within the recovery framework to fix a target, to allocate at least 20% of the money to SMEs. So I think this is something that needs to be worked upon, of course, at European level. I think beyond competencies, because you mentioned that also before, Brian, it's about will. So if we have the will to change things, if we have the will to do things differently on education, on skills, on training, on digital transformation, we can find solutions for countries to agree among themselves, and find proper ways also for SMEs, but also for NGOs and for people to be involved in the process.
You. Georgi, also on this as well, I want to come speak a bit more about investing in infrastructure in just a moment, but let's speak about investing in skills now as well. Where do we get the most value for our money when we're talking about digital education? You know, where should we put the majority of the cash, and in terms of return on investment? What works?
So the shorter version of it is that the sooner you start, meaning early childhood education and care, and then primary and secondary, the better. And then the return on investment you can measure in access to the labor force, or the general level of digital skills, which I would argue are also very, very important in terms of thriving in a democracy and being able to, let's say, address things like disinformation or fake news, etc. So the earlier you start, the better. And this means that addressing the teacher skills is one very, very important point. And this is what we are also seeing in the recovery and resilience plans. A lot of the member states are actually addressing this topic there, in addition to the infrastructure, of course, and to the question of access. And we shouldn't forget also the issues around equipment and devices. Then I think what also is very, very important is to address this in an integrated manner, because there is no point of putting the latest infrastructure or devices from the year 2021 if the teacher is not able to launch a learning management system and educate basically in a manner which is purposeful and meaningful from a pedagogical point of view. So in a way, I like to describe this that it needs to click. So digital education is effective only when it clicks. And actually, the experiences with some, let's call them early stage distance learning in the early phases of the pandemic shows that if not done right, it can actually even be counterproductive, because this is where mental health issues exist and so on. So to cut it basically down to the bottom line, the earlier you start, the better, including with early childhood and skills training for teachers. But very, very importantly, it needs to be done in an integrated, some say holistic manner, with the knowledge that infrastructure affects skills and vice versa. And I think this is the whole point also of this structured dialogue that the President of the Commission announced in the State of the Union, and which will include also digital education and a focus on it. Thank you.
Excellent. Fabrizio, I know you have to go in just a moment, but our audience is already active with questions. So just give you one quick question from Datsalutis Thumel, who's an attorney. What is planned to do about the age divide in digital skills? Strategies are a lot aimed at the younger generation, be it schools, universities, professional education. But what about those above 50?
So this is a very good question. The idea of no one should be left behind has been translated in a series of initiatives on gender, on rural, and in all those cases, the age element is taken into account, but that's not enough. What is important is that member states identify those segments of the population and the initiatives that they are doing to target those, and that we, in dialogue with them, identify what is really working, i.e., what are the best examples that we can try and replicate in other member states. Europe is an aging continent. This is something that we need to deal with, and the Commission has been reflecting in a number of documents in these aspects.
Thank you for. Okay, thanks also for your questions, which we already have quite a few in. I'm going to begin introducing those to the discussion in just a few moments as well. Eben, when we talk about democracy and the skills that are needed for you to be a digital citizen as well, are these just nice words, or is this really something critical to how our economy will function as well?
Yeah, we have to make sure that the only approach to this phenomenon is not only the economical approach that is much needed, of course, but the digitalization is going to affect our democracies at a whole from every perspective that we can think about. So we as citizens have to have a clear knowledge about in which way we are going to be affected in the perspective of our relation with public administration, in relation with our behavior as citizens, in relation even some people were talking about the question of disinformation, even about the information that we are receiving in order to make ourselves our opinion on democratic topics. So we have to be aware that we understand from a general point of view, from a general perspective, what this phenomenon entails at large. I think that this is mainly a question for public administrations, but not only for public administration, but for entrepreneurships as well, from the approach from the business life, because the trust on the digitalization, the view that many people could have about digitalization depends on the comprehension, the deep comprehension about what this change is going to make to our lives. So we have to make sure of this, even mainly from the perspective of European Union and European administrations.
Mauro, you spoke about the symmetrical sharing of technology, but also about the increasing demand of digital services as well. You know, a lot of politicians are concerned that as AI automation advances, jobs will be lost. But do you take the view that as digital infrastructure is deployed, digital services will increase and employment will be a byproduct of that as well?
Well, this is of course, it's a huge topic. Generally, I think one could be slightly optimistic about the effect of technology on the number of jobs that are created. If you look at history, so you could imagine that the net effect of technology will be positive, but that shouldn't allow us to relax, because first of all, there is a transition, and so there is a transition in which those who have skills that are complementary to technology, I mean, of course, they will benefit somehow. But those who have skills that can be substituted by technology, then they will be somehow penalized. So you have to ensure that the transition is fair in some ways. And second, of course, technology does not just affect the number of jobs; it also affects the quality of jobs. So one has to see, how, for example, technology is reshaping the relationship between employers and employees, and maybe is exacerbating the gap of power between employers and employees, maybe because the employer will be able to more easily monitor what the employee is doing. So question is not really only if you will retain your job in the future, but whether you would have like a higher well-being than today because of the job that you have. Now, if I may just add two things, because they are related and also related to what the previous speakers have said, and I think are very important. One is about digital skills. I think what we need to pay a lot of attention at is not only about the supply of training opportunities, but also about the take-up of training opportunities. Because what we have seen is that those who need more training, those, for example, those workers that are more exposed to the risk of automation, those who are more likely to lose their job, are also the ones who are less likely to take training opportunities. Actually, OECD has some nice statistics on that, and they found that actually low-skilled, low-educated workers have 1/3 participation rate to training opportunities compared to highly educated workers. So that means that there is a problem, right? I mean, we need to also work on the demand side. I mean, I can design the right incentives for workers that need it to take up those training opportunities in order to have more digital skills. And the second point that I wanted to make is that when we talk about digital skills, we're not just talking about coding. We're not talking about just the skills to use the technology. It's a more general approach that we need to have, So the question is much deeper than just saying, okay, we teach like how to navigate on internet to teachers in school. We actually have to reform our way in which we educate people, because in the future, if you want to be complementary to technology, you need to expand the qualities that are really properly humans, like for example, non-cognitive skills, the ability to be creative, the ability to work in teams, the ability to be in an uncertain environment. All these kind of things can be taught. There are educational systems in which, they tend to to have that approach. So they tend to give pupils the instruments to acquire knowledge in an uncertain environment. And those are the educational systems that are better equipping their future workforce to be in this new uncertain technology environment. I'm thinking about Finland, for example. So, but this deep reflection has to be taken at national level and also at European Union level. Of course, with the constraints that you have emphasized, Brian, because at the European Union level, of course, we have limited leverage to use. But I think it's very, very important to have that in mind. No, it's not just coding; it's deeper than that.
Okay, thank you. Eka, let's talk about investment now for a moment. We're investing in skills. We already discussed it. There's a lot of money being put towards that as well. But the purpose is to provide skills to support the infrastructure rollout, which will be needed across Europe as well. And as I understand it, there's an annual gap of investment, an investment gap for infrastructure, for digital technology, about 42 billion. That's a lot. Does that concern you?
Yes, but as Liberty Global, we've made some great investments also in our network. In the past year, we've made almost 2 billion in providing more internet to the homes and to enable everybody to take part of. To make sure that the digital divide doesn't, affect the vulnerable people. Yes. So, and we have many programs in place to make sure that to help to enable in our footprint in our operations that that the divide decreases.
What you say about investing 2 billion, for example, is interesting. Because business doesn't invest in ideas. Business invests in projects which will return an investment as well. So, Liberty Global invests 2 billion in this. How do you think it's viable for Europe to reach this, to bridge this investment gap of 42 billion? Is the market there, or as we heard from Dario, the skills, as the market consumption increases, the projects will be there, the investment will come with that as well. But that seems like it would take a lot of time. Are you comfortable with the pace of investment at the moment, Eka?
Well, yeah. The Recovery and Resilience Fund, will be an important role in bridging that divide. But I think for us, it's important to make sure that public funding is given to areas and focus in areas where there isn't it doesn't compete with public private investments, and it doesn't disincentivize and distort competition. I think that's for us an important one.
Okay, let me put this to Georgi as well. Georgi, under the previous administration, Commissioner Katainen was essentially Europe's salesman for investment, and he went around Europe, literally every single member state, encouraging investment in the Juncker plan as well, and the leverage capital that came out of that, to the surprise of many, was seen to be largely very successful as well. Do we need to do this again with digital infrastructure to raise this extra 42 billion a year? That we need a salesman or woman to go around Europe and to go around the globe, encouraging investment in Europe's digital progression?
Well, I would say that we definitely need a little bit of a salesmanship in the digital education infrastructure. That's the field which I know better than the general digital infrastructure itself. And I believe that what our Executive Vice President Vestager, together with several other commissioners, is launching this structured dialogue around digital education and skills aims partly also to do that. Why? Because it's true that we are seeing an unprecedented level in the RRF allocated to the digital skills education. But it is also true that in some cases, we're not entirely sure whether that investment is linked to the general reform efforts that are necessary if you digitize. And I think that all of us here might agree that when you are going through a digitalization of whatever sector, then you are also changing a lot about the processes. So it's not about putting analog into digital and then you have it. Actually, it's the reason why we don't speak anymore about e-commerce, but we speak about commerce and trade, and it's whole digital. And we still need to talk about digital education because in the relative maturity of it, it is way, way behind. So we definitely need top-level attention and people to either sell, as you said, or to drum, to beat the drum, to speak about the importance of all of this. And we probably need to do it in a slightly more simple way, not focusing only on the technology itself, and trying to combine the relative benefit of integrating technology for purposeful education, for something which develops also the type of skills that humans excel at. And we know that technology can actually help that process. So it needs to become, on the one side, it's very paradoxical. It needs to become less techy on the one side, but we need to also include in the discussion people who are really working on teachers. We need to include them. I mean, in the survey we did last year as part of the development of the Digital Education Action Plan, we had 60% of teachers saying that they have never taught online. 60%. Now imagine if 60% of population wouldn't be able to use banking services online or wouldn't be able to purchase goods. So it's this is the type of gap that we need to cover here, and it's a long-term process.
Okay, thank you. Victor Negrescu, do we have the long term to achieve this in terms of global competitiveness? Yeah, is Europe too thoughtful about this process? Do we need to invest in those who are better able to deploy projects which can turn into jobs and into competitive export markets quickly? Are we overthinking this?
I think we are not thinking about it enough. I think there are, of course, two elements that are important. We need to speed things up. So we have to use the available technologies, but we have to have a long-term plan. So for instance, if we are investing in implementing digital technologies or technologies in education, we have to make sure that we are developing in the same time European providers in the field. So if you create the network with European money, it will be interesting, of course, to have a supplier from Europe building that respective network. And unfortunately, we are not doing that enough. So we are, of course, spending a lot of money for the digital transformation, for the green transformation, but most of the products that we are going to use come from outside Europe, which is not bad because we have to have an open market. But in the same time, we have to make sure that we have a development of European innovation in those respective fields, and that we are supporting that respective innovation. So this is why SMEs do play a crucial role. So we have to have an integrated strategy in this regard to make sure that we are not simply spending money to bring technology that come obsolete afterwards. Because we know very well when it comes to investment in the digital sector, what we buy today may become obsolete in 6 months or in 1 year's time. So we always need to invest more and more and change that technology. So it might be good in the same time to convince those big companies, big players from outside Europe to invest more in Europe, while in the same time developing local companies that can do more on that. And of course, improve the innovation in the field because we are lacking behind. So today, the high-speed computers are rarely produced in Europe. We have problems when it comes to buying again and having the chips that we are using for our computers. We have a lot of things where we are still lacking behind, and we need to do more on that, working with the private sector, but also involving local communities. Because I think one of the crucial elements that has not been underlined today is that we need ownership over this digital transformation in order to make it more inclusive. And ownership means to use the particularity of the European landscape, which means a lot of discussions, having clusters, having groups of people, having networks, working together in doing all of that. And I have to mention that when it comes to digital education, I was working with Georgi, with the European Commission on that. Partially this has been done, and I think we have to use this model in building broader platforms when it comes to this digital transformation to make it successful. Because if individuals, if Europeans feel lost, if European SMEs feel lost in the game, feel that they are losing because of this transformation, the transformation will not be a successful story for Europe.
Thank you. I want to come back to you on using available technologies a little bit later on. I'm going to take some questions now, but I think we need to talk about if we're going to achieve 5G in automotive technology in areas like that, do we need to rebuild everything, or should we start with what we have and what's possible with that? But let's take some questions first. We have a lot of questions today, so thank you to our audience for that. Let's start with Jeremy Maddox. And what measures should be taken to ensure that recent migrants and asylum seekers, Eben, let's give you this one. What measures should be taken to ensure that recent migrants and asylum seekers are fully included in digital inclusiveness and not disadvantaged by reasons of language skills, international connectivity, and education and support to connect other citizens? Eben.
Well, I think that we have measures enough, and we have the numbers that we need in order to comply with all these obligations that we are pointing out. The plans from the European Commission, and in addition with the plans that were agreed with the European Parliament, imports more than billions and billions. We are talking about not only the recovery resilience plan that implies more than 700, in fact, 700 billions. We are talking about other programs in the MFF, like Horizon, like another programs. So I think in this way, it depends on the member states more than the European institutions, in order to assign where are the big priorities, and in order to fill these gaps that we were talking about all this panel. So I think that European administration and European institutions have to be so aware about and so watchful about the complement with the aims that are allocated in these programs. And beyond this point, I was talking about not only, as you mentioned, not only about the digital skills, but digital literacy. We have to highlight this as well in our programs. European Commission and European Parliament are working in plans about, for instance, disinformation, or about education, and in plans that try to fill these gaps. So we have to point this in our priority agenda, and not only the question related to market, or not only related or regarding the question or the economical approach, but from the enhancing of citizenship as well, by giving this kind of tools as well to behave in this digital era.
Thank you. Eka, I'll give you this one from Charlotte Gomerton. When we talk about infrastructures, what do we mean?
Infrastructure are networks, so it would be our fiber networks, coax, so we have, and of course our 5G. So our we call the fixed mobile convergence. So it's our our internet connections or broadband connections.
Okay, thank you. Jorgi, for you, let's roll two of these questions in together. Henk Mannikins asks, what mechanisms are there to translate EU objectives into coordinated national actions? And another question from Charlotte, and about 20% of financing, how much will be dispatched for which countries in priority? So mechanisms, how do we translate them into coordinated national action? And how do we use the financing for this as well in terms of priorities? Jorgi.
Okay, so in terms of coordination, as you know, we have limited competences in the education field, so I guess the question is around education. Nevertheless, we have a well-established process around the European semester, where annually we are working together with the member states and addressing their most important priorities. It's a well-established process, and it ends up normally with specific recommendations by the Commission that are followed up with the member states. And we have seen last year an extreme spike, if I can put it like that, in the, let's say, recommendations when it comes to the digital skills and education aspect. So this is something that we are following up in a coordinated manner with the member states. So it is outside of the pure voluntary cooperation and best practice exchange that we have normally as a setting for education policy. I just want to say that I would not underestimate that voluntary mechanism anyway, because what we have seen from the member states coming to us, in particular from COVID and from the wish to learn how others deal with this type of really big challenges, is a great level of, let's say, shared problems. And the wish for many member states to cooperate better at the EU level in the field of digital education. By the way, this is why we're going to be launching a European Digital Education Hub early next year to promote such closer cooperation at EU level when it comes to digital education. It does not exist yet, but it is something which comes out. And then when it comes to the question of the priority and then the financing of the priorities, we need to be aware that when it comes to member states investment, of course, it is the by and large greatest part of the necessary investment in education and training. So we do have the RRF where we are closely working now with the member states on their relevant investment areas. I would say that with exception of a few member states, we have now all of them on the table, and we will now go a bit deeper in the question, in particular, investment and reform. So we have to see to what extent reforms also accompany this investment whenever that is not clear. So that is one way of doing it. And we do have some instruments such as the Erasmus program, the Horizon program, it was mentioned already, where we are able to incentivize specific developments. But of course, in comparison to the national budgets, these are much less in terms of total numbers. So the main responsibility here does indeed remain with the member states, and what the Commission needs to perhaps do a bit more of is to support the member states to invest this money more perhaps smartly, as we say. So whenever there is an infrastructure, let's put some skills as well for teachers next to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to talking about technology, Victor. So questions here, two questions from Michelle. I'll give this to Victor and to Mario. So Michelle says there's a spotlight on high capacity networks as an asset to reduce the digital divide. What's the panel's position on the most future-proof technology to ensure no European is left behind? And she also asks, how does this apply to rural areas? Victor.
I think it's important to make sure that everyone has access from big communities, but also from rural areas, from mountain areas, from isolated areas. So I initiated also in this regard a pilot project focusing on that, in giving access to those isolated areas to connectivity, but also to technologies, in particular when it comes to using technologies in education. So I think it's crucial, of course, not to leave anyone behind. And of course, we speak about people in rural areas, but we also have to mention people with disabilities, people that, of course, come from disadvantage, social disadvantage groups. So it's very important, again, to have an inclusive approach when it comes to digital transformation. I think this is significantly important because, if I said earlier that if one individual feels left behind, the transformation will not work. But of course, in the same time, I think the purpose of the European Union is also to make sure that all these transformations are dealt with in a proper way. So we speak today about digital cohesion. We need digital cohesion. And it's a new concept that has been defined several times in different discussions, but I think we have to give content to that. And in this regard, of course, we have to learn how to use the most innovative technologies, but also technologies that are safe for individuals in the same time. And of course, we need to move forward as fast as possible, because there is an urgency when it comes to the intervention in this domain. And of course, for that, we need to use all the available resources existing in Europe. And fortunately, and this to be positive also in my intervention, I think there are resources in Europe to do all of that. And there are wonderful and positive examples in different places across Europe of local communities that have succeeded, of businesses that have done a great job. And of course, we need to use those good examples and make them European and upscale them as fast as we can.
Thank you. Mario.
So let me start from the second question about rural areas very quickly. Let me say, well, first of all, I think the European Commission with the European Union in general, with the new telecom regulation has, has some kind of promising plans for it. I think they have that in mind. They had that very much in mind when they drafted it. So they have some models, like, for example, co-investment models, we'll say only models that are, conceived really in a way that you would imagine it would increase the incentives to invest in peripheric areas. And I think I'm quite optimistic that this is going to work. There is also an idiosyncratic factor here, which is the pandemic, that can help as well, depending on how much we can maintain the flexibility that we have experienced during the pandemic in terms of teleworking. Because if companies and even the public sector will be able to learn from the pandemic experience and allow more geographic mobility from workers, that means that we will have more demand for connectivity also in rural areas, right? Because people will not necessarily need to work in the cities. And that will also generate an incentive to invest more in broadband. And so, it depends on that as well. But I think in the future, probably we will see more investment coming for that reason. On your first question, what is the technology which has the higher potential to address inequality? I think the easy answer would be artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence can basically really play in both ways. It's like it's like an amazing weapon that can be used for good or bad things. I'm not sure whether weapons can be used for good things, but that's another thing. But I'm just saying, artificial intelligence, if is well used, can really benefit those who are more in need. I'll just give you an example. We are doing some research at Bruegel to see whether biometric technology is being used to increase safety at work. Now, we know that this is a huge problem. Thousands of people actually die on the workplace every year. It's really, like an endemic. Technology can address that. There are some biometric technologies that allow, to increase dramatically the security on the workplace. However, up until now, we see that the artificial intelligence adoption by companies is mostly thought as a means to increase productivity of companies. But I think if we design the right incentive system to incentivize companies to invest more in technologies that is used to address issues, for example, for workers, this is very promising. So, I mean, in a nutshell, I think it could be artificial intelligence, but it depends very much on us. It depends very much on, you know, our policy approach in order to achieve what artificial intelligence can achieve.
Thank you. I went to see James Bond film last night. I can tell you that biometrics in the workplace is not good for your health, without spoiling the whole film for you. So also, Eka, I just want to ask you about, we talk a lot about infrastructure, and it makes it sound as though we have to do everything new. We have to change everything and rip out all the old technologies to achieve Europe's digital progress. Is that really true, or are we in danger of over-specifying networks and investing money, wasting money for areas which really don't need it?
Absolutely not. I think if you look at our networks, you know, we've proven that with our existing networks, we can provide very, very fast internet speeds, and of course, this is different in every country. I mean, in Switzerland, you know, where you have you know, you have to deal with the mountains. If you look at, for example, in Holland, it's also the existing network that's already there. So I think what's very important is that the European policymakers should, you know, incentivize upgrading existing infrastructure and investment in new technologies. And this is also much better for an environment, and you know, and this is also very important that this is technology neutral, because there'll be different business cases in every country, you know, for the type of infrastructure chosen.
Okay, so it's not necessary that we have a single standard for the whole of Europe, but we use whatever we have to achieve the key outcome.
No, absolutely not. No.
Okay, very well. Victor, and then I want to ask Ivan as well. Victor, the idea that the strategy is well funded, you know, there's a coherent approach to it as well. There've got to be weak links in this digital strategy. Where are they, and how do we address them? Where are your main concerns for achieving our digital progress?
So my biggest concern is that we have the targets, we have some resources available, but we don't have an integrated approach. Basically, the steps that need to be made in order to deliver on those respective targets. So, of course, in the same time, of course, I think such an action plan, of course, with clear steps will reduce the risk and will make people feel comfortable also with the process itself. We tend to presume, again, in this strategy that everything will go just fine. But, you know, I like to be cautious. So I'm also cautious in our actual capacity to deliver on those respective targets. We also saw that in the past. We had strategies, we had targets, we didn't deliver on that, and we stopped talking about that. So I think it's important to move things in another way. And what is also significant is to make sure that member states also take responsibility for those respective targets, because it's good to discuss among us at European level, but it's important for national member states, national governments, to deliver on those respective targets and work with the local players, with the private sector, with NGOs, with different groups in delivering on those respective targets. So this will be my biggest concern right now, making sure that everyone knows what they need to do in order to make those objectives feasible.
Thank you. Ivan, our weakest links, where are they, and what do we need to do to address them?
I think that we have to be aware that we need coordination among the member states and the European targets that Victor was meant. I think that we have to coordinate all the funds that are going to be mobilized to the comply of these objectives. And as well, we have to be aware that the backbone of our economy are the SMEs. We were talking on this fact all throughout the meeting. So we need to protect these SMEs. I'm going to put an example on this. We know that SMEs that use intellectual property rights, for instance, are very much profitable than the others, and only a few of them are using intellectual property rights, or are using patents, or are using these kind of things that are the pre-digitalization topic. So we have to ensure that these SMEs are completely aware of what we are facing on, and to coordinate everything with member states. As I said at the beginning, I think we have the funds, we have the measures, we have the tools, but we need to coordinate everything. This is the big challenge from my point of view.
Thank you. We're pretty close on time with a lot of comments. So I'll read through some of them just before we finish as well. I just give a summary of those. But Jorge, let's go back to the technology side as well. How aware is the Commission of what capacity we already have compared to what we know we need to invest in when it comes to 5G architecture? The infrastructure needed to build roads for automated driving and all those dimensions that we need for smart cities as well. Are we just beginning to get our heads around this, or do we have a clear idea of what we have in terms of existing capacity and what needs to be built?
We have a pretty clear view when it comes to the, let's say, basic digital backbone, and I would include here 5G and gigabit. So we have relevant indexes. It's called the DESI, DESI index that we cover member states. We know that only 20%, for example, of schools have close to gigabit connections. So we do have a pretty clear view on let's say, that level of digital readiness in education and training systems. On automated cars, not my business area, so I'll pass on if you agree on this. But I want to just echo what here the two MEPs said. I think it's not like we don't know where we need to put our attention to. It's more about how. And one example shows you this very clearly, because when we speak about inclusion, and that's what we talk about today, and we are back, let's say, last year, we have a problem of a child not being able to attend online provision of education. Well, the problem can be various. It could be the lack of infrastructure. It could be the lack of teacher training. It could be a lack of device. So all of this needs to come together, and we need to make an effort to have a comprehensive view. And this needs actually an attention from different policy areas. And this is where I see the challenge. The challenge is to have the education minister talk to the finance minister together with the telecoms minister, and all of them also being listened by the social, let's say, minister perhaps, and agreeing on a common vision. This is really difficult because of the way we operate. I don't think that it is going to be easy, but in a way, there is not really any other choice but to take this integrated view. And this is where I think we will go to together with the political leadership, and now the attention to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, so I'm just going to scan through some of the comments very quickly. Then I'm going to ask each of you for 30-second closing remark as well. Sergio, his question. Sergio highlighted the people living in destitution. Poor households have access. They need to have access to devices, connections, and skills. And digital inclusion is not only a matter of social justice, but is also a way out of destitution too. And also, there's some highlighting of become more digital at the same time to compensate for inequalities. So a lot of discussion about inequalities, closing that divide, and the opportunity that comes from digital upskilling and investment as well. So those comments over there, our social media team can pay attention to some of that. Let's go to our panel for their closing remarks. Mario, over to you, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I guess my core message is that we need a more symmetric distribution of value that is coming from technology, and this is really part of the solution. It's not just the problem that we want to address with more digital infrastructure, for example. It's really the way in which we can have more digital prosperity, and so that's why it's very important to keep it in mind in everything that we do in our policy strategy in the digital space.
Thank you. Iban, over to you, 30 seconds.
In Europe, a study shows that we are pioneering ideas, innovation, and research related to digitalization and new technologies. The European budget, as I said, will deliver so much important investment, and with the adoption of fair and trustworthy strategies on data, AI technologies, and digital services, we will provide legal certainty and safeguards for the development of European technologies. Finally, we need a digital illustrated society that will drive the Union towards a humanistic digitalization that places humans in the center and guarantee our democracies, the respect of our fundamental rights and the rule of law. So, thank you very much for your invitation again.
You're welcome. The human-centric approach. Jorgi, over to you, 30 seconds.
Well, I want to say something completely new, but it's something that we very deeply believe in. We think that on the one side, we need really a high-performing digital education ecosystem. We should be able to access knowledge and education in the same way we access a lot of other services, which are perhaps a bit less important for the well-being of the let's say, of the human nature. And on the other side, we should always be aware that with the evolution of technology, we need to evolve the type of skills and the competences. This is why for us, a high-performing digital education ecosystem with all the infrastructure and connectivity is the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the skills and the competences of people that should address basically also the labor market needs, but go much beyond that, because the transformation is way too big. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eka, over to you, 30 seconds.
Well, we as Liberty, we invest in our networks and provide the best possible connectivity for customers in Europe, but that's not all you need for a connected Europe. And we understand we have a role to play in enhancing people's digital skills, not just from a very young age, but also through integration programs for minorities and the elderly. I believe if both public and private actors really put a focus on digital connectivity for the coming years, we can easily reach the digital decade target set for 2030. And given the positive views in this panels and actors online here, I'm confident we will get there. And I also wanted to thank GIGAEurope for enabling this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And last word to Victor.
I think there is a huge potential in Europe for succeeding in doing the digital transformation. And of course, we have to develop our own model. Our digital transformation model is an inclusive digital transformation model. So we should continue to promote this idea of digital social justice. And in order to do that, of course, we need to invest more, make sure that the transformation is a process that includes everyone, that leaves no one behind, focus on the quality of the process in the same time, and not forget the initial stages that imply more investment also in education and training. So I'm comfortable after this discussion today that we have the resources to make it, but it's up to us to raise the bar, raise the standards, and be more ambitious when it comes to acting at European level.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks to all our panelists, to Victor, Fabrizia, Jorgi, Iban, Mario, and Eka. Also, thank you to GIGAEurope for the support today, and to our Euractiv team. You don't see them, but there's a lot working in the background to make this all happen. Zoran, Malta, and Tamara in the studio, and also to our social media team. I wish you a very good afternoon. I'm Brian Maguire.